Hey everybody, this is Mr. Moppin coming at you with another APUSH video. This time we're taking a look at topic 8.12, Youth Culture of the 1960s. Now, when we talk about the 1960s, we always have, this idea of a time in transition. And that is certainly the case. We're going to be seeing the values of America being questioned in a way that we really had never seen before. And this questioning of values, be it, trust in the government, are issues of race and gender and sexuality and fashion and music and all sorts of aspects of life. This is going to be brought to the forefront primarily by the young adults of the 1960s. And remember, who were these young adults of the 1960s? Well, they were the baby boomers of the 1940s and 50s. We've said before that the baby boomers were the largest generation in American history up to that point. And by being the largest generation in American history, you're going to have a major impact at every stage of your life. Be it from, how hospitals operated to how schools, elementary schools and high schools operated. And now as these folks are becoming adults, it's going to be affecting, college campuses and the workplace. And this generation is not going to be just unusual up to that point due to its size, but due to its relative affluence. Remember, this is going to be a generation that's going to have millions of children growing up in suburbs, children that are going to be able to have, birthday parties and toys and, a sense of being able to enjoy being a child, not just emotionally, but financially. And with this upbringing, these are going to be kids that are going to seem that their voices do matter, that they can, and should have an impact. And with more of these kids that are affluent being able to afford college, they're going to be attending college in record numbers. And remember, college is this place, just by definition, that has you, question and think critically about, long-held beliefs. So when you take how colleges operate normally, and a large generation of young people that are going to be attending these colleges with already a sense of feeling that they, have a right to express their beliefs, that's going to be very significant. And then add another ingredient to it due to the impact of the civil rights movement for African Americans. From the mid-50s now going into the 1960s, young boomers are going to be noticing that that you can fight for change, that actions do matter, that you can, upend tradition if tradition is immoral in some way. So these folks are going to be, activated and motivated by the use of civil disobedience and nonviolent demonstrations and protest marches and all that kind of stuff. So with that being said, let's take a look at some of the actions of these student groups as we get into the 1960s. And when we take a look at these student groups and many of these activists, we tend to call these folks collectively the New Left, that there's a generation, a movement of liberals in America that are really going to be pressing their values and having a major impact throughout the 1960s and 70s, no question about it. And one of the groups that's going to be at the forefront of this is a group known as SDS, the Students for a Democratic Society. And what they will do is use the platform of colleges and universities, those campuses, to try to promote values of questioning, questioning the actions of institutions like schools and questioning the institutions of government. And in turn, questioning our values. To be a boomer meant that you were raised with certain values. And remember, you were raised generally in a conservative, conformist society that valued consumerism. Is that really the right way? Well, for example, take a look at the most well-known document associated with the SDS. This is going to be known as the Port Huron Statement. So if you take a look at some of these, just a few lines from this, you kind of get a sense of, where this group is coming from. You can see here they say that we are people of this generation, bred in at least modest comfort, housed now in universities, looking uncomfortably to the world we inherit. So we've kind of said that this is a generation that's kind of in a unique position in American history up to this point, being able to enjoy affluence and be able to have the opportunity to enjoy that college experience and be able to reflect on what America is at this time. They say that when we were kids, the U.S. was the wealthiest and strongest country in the world. So, the idea being is that you are raised at a time where you believe in American exceptionalism. You believe in American greatness on the global stage. And of course, you tend to believe that that would also permeate, domestically. As we grew, however, our comfort was penetrated by events too troubling to dismiss. And if you go a little further, it talks about how despite this sense of, affluence and success and exceptionality, we are still, tremendously anxiety-ridden over a very real possibility of nuclear war, nuclear Armageddon. And that's on a global stage. But what about, a real sense of hypocrisy here domestically with regards to, the way that we view race? If you're looking at, Jim Crow segregation in America. So, these folks are kind of saying, hey, we've been kind of raised on this notion of American exceptionality, and we've enjoyed, at least some of us have enjoyed, success. But with this vantage point of being able to, use this success and reflect, the question then becomes, what really should our values be? What should we be focusing in on in terms to really truly make this thing called America really what it was intended to be? And I think this sentence right here kind of encapsulates what the SDS is all about, and in many respects what the youth movement of the 1960s is all about. It says, we would replace power rooted in possession, privilege, or circumstance by power and uniqueness rooted in love, reflectiveness, reason, and creativity. The idea being is that this is a generation that has looked at the values that they have been raised with, and they are rejecting them. They have been told that the key to life is access to money, and that's done through a quality education, to get that access to money through a great job, and you are determining your success in life by how big of a house you can afford and how many cars and what kind of car you can drive, and a sense of you don't question the government, you trust the government, you accept the status quo in terms of what society says based on race and gender and things like that, and you accept conformity, in fact embrace conformity, and war is a legitimate means to achieve goals as a society. And so these young people are saying that no, it doesn't have to be that way. We don't have to have that kind of society. That we can have a society that rejects war and rejects racism and sexism, and rejects conformity and consumerism, and embraces, the idea of equality regardless of race or gender, and, focuses in on growth spiritually as opposed to financially, that, we embrace uniqueness and creativity versus conformity. And so there's just this real sense that the kids are not listening to what the parents are preaching anymore. That they've got this platform, they've got this opportunity, and they're going to run with it. They have something to say, and they're going to say it. And so the SDS, in many respects, is going to be kind of sending this message of we need to be a less militaristic society, a society that is based more on peace and love and understanding and creativity and individuality and all that kind of stuff. Now, speaking of free speech, we are going to be seeing out at Cal Berkeley in the mid-1960s the emergence of what we will call the free speech movement. Now, what was this all about? Well, to be a student at Cal Berkeley in the early 1960s meant that you had very noticeable limitations on what you could produce and what you could publicly, speak about on a platform in terms of politics. Basically, unless you were part of the official Republican College Party or the Democrat College Party, you really weren't allowed to have any kind of an official political organization. And for many of these young people, the major parties didn't seem to fit their values like they used to anymore. Also, if you were a faculty member, you were still bound by loyalty oaths that were put in place 15 years earlier that basically said if you show any leftist inclinations, if you do anything but bash socialism and communism and Marxist Leninism, then you're going to lose your job. And so there was a real sense that the powers that be at this university, and note, this is not just some university. Cal Berkeley is one of the most respected academic institutions in the country. You've got young people that are going to begin to kind of rise up and say, hold on here a second. Why are we accepting this? This is supposed to be an institution of higher learning where we question things. It's not just one thing to question, what was, in this book, questioning what the author was intending, but rather questioning the very principles that define our society. And if we can't do that at a college campus like this that respects, academic integrity, where can we do it in America? And so you're going to see the usage of protest marches like you see here. We'll see the use of sit-ins on the college campus to really put pressure on the university administration to change its rules. And it will prove effective. We'll see in 1965 Cal Berkeley open things up to allow for much broader expression of political beliefs. And you're going to see this replicated at college campuses all across America. And this is going to help to explain to some degree why college campuses are going to be the hubs of the anti-war movement in America during the Vietnam War. Now, remember, values and culture, come in many forms, and part of how that is manifested is through music. And, we talked previously about, how, swing and jazz were not particularly embraced by the young generation that was embracing rock and roll and all the rebelliousness that went along with it. But the thing about rock and roll that seemed to be lacking with some of these folks in the youth culture was the sense that rock and roll music was not really focused on being reflective and looking for a sense of morality and a sense of justice socially. Rock and roll music is, by the early 60s was about falling in love and fast cars and, surfing and, all that kind of stuff. But it wasn't seen as, spiritually deep. And folk music will serve as an outlet for that. And if you are talking about the significance of of folk music in the 1960s, there's probably no bigger name than Bob Dylan pictured here. Through his, songs, like a Rolling Stone and The Times They Are A-Changin', you're going to be seeing Bob Dylan, express the sentiment of many of these young people that they have different values, that, they want something more meaningful in life than a car and a house and a job. And, they're looking for, a better society for all Americans. And, rock and roll didn't seem to make sense to the parents, and neither does folk music. And in fact, whereas rock music was scary to many parents because it was seen as just rebellious, especially with regards to, questioning authority and attitudes towards sex and stuff like that, folk music, even to some degree, was maybe even scarier to some parents because folk music did have a political edge to it where rock and roll really didn't have that. And so there's this sense of, okay, you've got these young, clearly leftist, musicians out there, and are they going to be using this music to indoctrinate our kids in a leftist way that might move them to becoming socialists or, something along those lines? So there is a sense of subversiveness with folk music that was different than the subversiveness that you saw with rock and roll. Now, don't take this to mean that folk music is going to kill rock music. It's not. It's going to exist simultaneously, and folk music is going to have a little bit of a heyday in the early to mid-'60s, and then it'll kind of go away. It'll only have a heyday for about maybe 3 or 4 years. That's about it. But it will be a significant part of what these cultural values are for young people as we start to get into the middle part of the 1960s. All right. We will see you next time. Bye-bye.